Did you know there are over 300 companies selling e-bikes in the US? We are spoiled for choice, and it can be overwhelming. Since 2021, I've explored hundreds of e-bikes and produced detailed reviews on more than I can count. I've learned how e-bikes are manufactured at factories, sat down for extended interviews with CEOs and policymakers, learned about retail and service with many e-bikes, and ridden e-bikes all over the USA with hundreds of viewers on our GoElectric group rides. My personal insight combined with everything I've learned from viewers in person and in the comments section have helped me to develop a strong sense for what constitutes a competitive e-bike. In fact, several of the leading manufacturers told me they've made improvements to their e-bikes and helmets based on my critiques. Now I'm putting the experience to work, making sense of it all for you with this GoElectric e-bike buying guide. I'll show you how to identify the best e-bike for your needs and budget. We'll talk about the major players as well as brands and styles you may not have discovered on your own. Welcome to the GoElectric e-bike buying guide series.
Hey everyone, Miss GoElectric here. These are the fat tire electric bikes that I have reviewed. Now, these are the tanks of the e-bike world. Like the name says, they have a full-size tire that's 26 inches by 4 inches wide, which means that it can pretty much go on any kind of terrain, whether that's snow, sand, you can ride over big stumps and logs, and you can even take these on pavement like any other bike. Like any other category, there are a ton of options to choose from. So I want to start off by going through an entry-level price point of about $1,000 all the way up to about $4,000 at the high end and show you all the differences between these bikes and what they offer. And hopefully that will give you all the information that you need to help you find the right fat tire e-bike for you. This here is a good example of an entry-level fat tire bike. This is called the Multijoy Spaniel, and it's listed around $1,500, but I've seen it on sale as low as about $1,200. But as I said earlier, they are tanks, and that means they are heavy and powerful. But that also means that they're a little bit more challenging to maneuver, they are hard to transport, and they're inefficient. Now let's talk about the power and the weight. Most fat tire e-bikes have a rear hub motor like this that have a minimum of 750 watts of power, and that's equivalent to about 1 horsepower. And with all that power and weight, you do need a bigger battery. This here is 20 amp hours, but the minimum is around 15 amp hours that I've seen in this category, but I would stick with a bigger one like this for more capacity. A big battery means more weight. They're usually around 10 pounds extra, and considering the tires and wheels, these bikes typically are around 75 to about 100 pounds. Now, with all of that weight and performance, you need good stopping power. Every single fat tire e-bike that I've reviewed has disc brakes, but this one at the entry level has mechanical levers. Now, those are going to be more maintenance. They'll probably stretch more often because of all this weight and performance. So I tend to look out for hydraulic brakes. I also tend to look out for full coverage fenders. This is a lot of rubber on the road, but if you're going to be even taking them off-road in a lot of different conditions, you want to protect yourself from getting mud all over you. I also look for things like integrated lights and a rear rack, which are becoming increasingly popular as standard features on these bikes, so definitely keep a lookout for those. The shifter here is a 7-speed Shimano Cis Index, and that's pretty typical of this price point at the entry level, but I like to usually look out for an 8-speed, something with more gears, so that I have more access to that low-end torque, but also higher top speeds, which becomes really important, especially when your battery runs out of energy and you need to pedal it yourself. I mentioned that these bikes are heavy duty, and you can typically expect a payload capacity of anywhere between 350 pounds and up to 450 pounds. And with all of that weight, you need a good suspension. Now, these fat tires are also a form of suspension. When you have them fully loaded up to the max PSI, they're going to be a really bouncy ride, but more efficient. I tend to deflate mine down to maybe 8 to 12 PSI, especially when I'm going on sand, snow, or really rugged terrain, so that it can provide a lot smoother of a ride, but keep in mind, that is gonna be less efficient. But that's not the only suspension. Most fat tire e-bikes also have a front fork suspension. This one is 80 millimeters of travel, which is probably the lowest that I would go in this category. You can get them in spring, hydraulic, or air. And I say the more the merrier as far as the travel goes, so I like to look out for 100 millimeters or more. One particular feature that I think is very attractive on this particular bike is that it has a USB port on the battery. Now, it's pretty common that you'll have a computer screen that has a USB port on the bottom of it so that you can export the power from the battery to your phone if you want to charge it while you're riding. But what's unique here is that I could take the battery off of the bike and I could bring it into a tent or anything like that when I'm camping and use it to power other devices. And I think this is a feature that is worth looking out for. Now let's look at the next bike in the lineup. This next bike is the Vtuvia SN100. It's right around the same price point, maybe $100 extra. And one main difference here is not only the frame style, this is really designed and pitched as a hunting e-bike, but it also has hydraulic brakes up front. Hydraulic brakes means that you don't have to put a lot of effort into the stopping power when you're pulling on the lever, and they're also less maintenance. Some other differences include that there are no fenders included, it has a more robust, wider rear rack, and a frame integrated headlight here, and an adjustable stem. All right, now let's check out the next bike in the lineup. For an extra $100 or so, you can get something like this, the Magicycle Cruiser Pro. One big difference is that this has a 52-volt system, so that means a little bit more power and more efficiency. And in this case, it's a 20 amp hour battery, so more capacity as well. But one thing that sets this brand apart from some of the others is that it has a ton of accessories to choose from. And if you are using a bike like this to go camping, hunting, or anything like that, you probably are gonna wanna kit it out just like I have with a front rack, pannier bags, but they also carry covers for the bike. So if you are out camping and you wanna keep your bike protected, that is an amazing option to be able to include. One small detail I like to point out with this bike is that Magicycle includes an accessory which is like a neoprene padded sleeve on the frame. That way, if your chain is bouncing around, it doesn't create a lot of noise while you're riding. And since a lot of these bikes that I've talked about so far are so close in price and specifications, these little details could make the difference. But let's check out the next bike in the lineup. This here is the Aventon Aventure, and this is the first generation. They do have a newer gen that has more features and is a little bit more expensive, but this one sits at about $1,500. It also includes a lot of those features we talked about with the previous bikes, like fenders and an integrated headlight, but this is a more refined bike for a lot of reasons. Immediately when you look at the frame, the welds are nicely buffed out, it has a great paint finish, but the main thing you'll notice here is that the battery is integrated into the frame, unlike the other bikes we've talked about so far. It is a smaller capacity as far as that battery goes, but this is really aimed to be a little bit more on the lifestyle side than more utilitarian like the others we've talked about. Now, I've added a lot of accessories here to make it a little bit more functional, and that includes the front basket here, the phone mount, the rear rack, and pannier bags by Axiom that are made out of a recycled fishnet material. All of these accessories you can get directly through the brand, but you also get from the brand Aventon things like the dealer network that has over 1,000 locations, an extended warranty period of 2 years instead of some of the others have like a 1-year period, and probably my most favorite thing is the app integration where you can connect with the community, you can also unlock higher top speeds, and you can record your rides. But now let's check out the next bike in the lineup. This here is the Velotric Nomad 1, and just like we saw with the Aventon before, it has a deep step-through design which makes it really easy to get on and off. But a little bit different from the Aventon is that this riding position sits more upright because these handlebars sweep back towards the rider, giving it a more casual riding experience. Like the other bikes I've talked about before, this includes the fenders. It also came with an integrated front light and a battery-powered rear tail light here, but I've added, for more functionality, a front basket and a rear rack. And I also love that Velotric provides this pop of color. This one's called Mango. But one thing I don't like about this particular model is that the battery is under 15 amp hours, and I think that is as low as you can pretty much go with this style of bike. And with an MSRP of over $1,500, that is a tough sell, but a lot of times I see this bike on sale for hundreds of dollars less, somewhere around $1,300 to $1,400, and that makes more sense there. Let's check out the next bike. This here is the Troxus Explorer, and actually I was one of the first to review this bike before it was even available to the public, and it was the first time I was reviewing a fat tire electric bike that had a huge 20 amp hour battery and also these rear taillights that are on either side of the frame. I really like to look out for that because it provides really great visibility no matter what side of the bike you're on. Like the last two bikes we've seen, this has a nice step-through design. It's a premium paint finish and it has an integrated battery back here, but there is one thing different that I want to talk about with this bike in particular. Now, it has a 750 watt motor like the rest, but the delivery of this power is calibrated much differently. It is a really powerful, very performant bike, even when you're on the lower ends of the pedal assist modes. Each one of these models is calibrated very differently with its software. For example, the Aventon Aventure has a gradual, smooth power delivery. The Velotric in its default mode going up to 20 miles per hour is a little bit more aggressive, but when you unlock it up to its 25 mile per hour top speed, it does become even more aggressive. Now, when we talk about the Troxus Explorer, there is no way that you can customize that power delivery. It's just giving you pretty much all of it, all at once, even in the lower pedal assist mode, so this can feel a little bit scary. This is by far the most aggressive fat tire electric bike that I have ridden and reviewed. All right, let's check out the next bike. This here is the Freebeat MorphRover, and this fat tire e-bike doesn't come with a lot of the features that we've seen on the previous bikes like fenders or racks or anything like that, and the quality of the components are closer to the entry level, but this bike sits at about $1,800 and it has something really unique that I thought was worth pointing out. Now, you might have noticed that there is this cable running off of the back of the seat, and that's because not only can you ride this bike on the road like a regular fat tire e-bike, but you can also, well, let me show you. This turns into an exercise bike. So you can put it on this stand and essentially get your workout in indoors. This bike has a phone mount and you can connect the bike up to your phone wirelessly, then launch the Freebeat app and you'll have access to exercise programs, rhythmic games, and also scenic simulated trails. Now, the neat thing about this seat is that it has a sensor in it, so just like when you're in a spin class, if you lift up, this actually starts to reward you with additional points on your account. One thing that I think is really cool is that while you're exercising, you're actually capturing energy and recharging your battery. I think it is so cool that no matter what the weather is outside, you could use your bike every day if you want to. I'll put a link in the description below for the review, but let's check out the next bike. This here is the Ride1Up Rift, and it is very similar to some of the other bikes we talked about already, considering it has the 20 amp hour battery, full coverage fenders, integrated lights, hydraulic brakes, but it does have a front fork that has quite a bit more travel with 120 millimeters of travel. The star of the show for me though is this frame integrated rear rack. Now, I have added on the passenger kit, which includes this seat back here, this protective wheel guard, and these foot pegs, so you can have someone ride back here. I really like the fact that you can take the seat off and replace it with a basket really easy with a quick release system. The review of this bike is coming soon, so I'll put the link for that in the description below. But let's check out the next bike. This here is the Mokwheel Basalt ST. Now the price point of this is about $2,200 MSRP, but I've seen it on sale at about $1,900. They usually offer a lot of free accessories as well when you buy the bike, but one accessory that is not included that I think is a game changer is this one right here that's mounted to the bike. Now, this is an inverter. So what you can do with this is plug it into your bike and use that battery power and export it to this device. And then you can plug in other devices to be able to charge and use that battery power. I haven't seen another fat tire electric bike that has an inverter that's so well integrated, and I'll link my review in the description below. This is very similar to the Rift we just looked at. It has a big 20 amp hour battery, full coverage fenders, a good suspension, but one of the main differences that none of the other bikes have had so far is that this has a torque sensor. The rest of the bikes have cadence sensors, and essentially they know when you're pedaling, but they don't know how hard you're pedaling, whereas a torque sensor can give you more power depending on how much pressure you're putting down on the pedal. The result is that the bike is able to give you a more smooth application of power, and it feels very natural when you're riding. It is also really efficient in comparison to a cadence sensor. If I had a choice between a cadence and a torque sensor, I'd take a torque sensor every single time. Although they are a little bit more expensive, I really appreciate the riding experience from them. Let's check out the next bike. This is the Nireeka Prime, and what is unique about this bike compared to the rest that I've talked about so far is that this frame is made out of carbon fiber. Not only does that contribute to a more lightweight bike, but it also has a little bit of flex in it, which absorbs some of that vibration and acts a little bit more like a suspension as well. As you probably have noticed, this has a rigid front fork, whereas all the other bikes in this category we've talked about has a suspension front fork. Now, Nireeka offers a suspension front fork for this bike, but I chose not to get it because I felt that it really detracted from the aesthetic, so I'd rather sacrifice comfort than have it ruin this design, because I honestly think this is probably the most beautiful bike I have ever seen. Every bike that we've seen so far in this category has a rear hub motor, which directly powers the wheel and is not connected to the pedals, chain, or shifting. This is the mid-drive motor, and it's connected to the pedals and the chain, unlike the rear hub motors, which are directly in the back wheel. The advantage to this kind of motor is that you have more access to torque and higher top speeds. The disadvantage of having so much power at the chain is that you have to be conscious of when you're shifting because there's a lot of load and you could snap the chain or damage it. So this is really for more advanced riders. Some other things that make this bike special include the upgraded motor I chose here, which produces 1,500 watts of power, and this bike can power you up to 35 miles per hour. This is probably the least comfortable bike in this lineup, and the motor is rather noisy. I also had optional fenders that broke off because they were made of kind of a cheap plastic, but honestly, nothing turns heads more than this Nireeka Prime, so I still think it's one of my favorites. I hope this video was helpful as we went through every single one of these models and saw all the different features they offer, and providing some tips that will ultimately help you find the right fat tire electric bike for you. I have links in the description below of each one of these for their full reviews, but until next time, drive, fly, ride. Go electric.